Hi, aloha, welcome back to my channel. Thanks for joining me and for tuning in, and I hope today's topic of discussion will be helpful to you in some way, shape, or form. So today I wanted to make a video on a subject that is it's a deep subject, yes, but it's a deep problem that any spiritual seeker will inevitably face. And it's the topic or issue of spiritual bypassing. So what is spiritual bypassing? It's a term coined by the therapist and spiritual teacher Robert Augustus Masters and his wife Diane. And they even wrote a book about it. I believe it's just called Spiritual Bypassing. There might be a subtitle to it. And if I can find some kind of link, I'll try to link it in the description box down below. So what is spiritual bypassing? So to just take the words from the horse's mouth, I'm going to be looking over here because I wrote it all down on my dry erase board so I don't get it wrong and I can basically spit it out verbatim. So in the words of Robert Masters, the person that coined this term, spiritual bypassing is using spiritual practices and or beliefs to avoid dealing with painful situations, emotional challenges, developmental tasks, and rationalizing that avoidance with spiritual language. And he also uses this phrase that's the more shorthand summary of what all of that means. And his shorthand description is basically spiritual bypassing is dissociation in holy drag. And so it's this thing that most spiritual students, spiritual seekers, inevitably hit because most spiritual seekers are more conscientious by nature. And it's that nature of a spiritual seeker that can oftentimes actually lead them into this space of spiritual bypassing, because it's the conscientious aspect of the conscientious nature and that aspect of the person that leads them into the space of spiritual bypassing. Because inevitably, as we start learning ourselves on a spiritual level, we are confronted with the task of how do you relate and associate and work through challenges that come up, and our biggest challenges are usually in relationships, relationships of all kinds. And so a lot of times what a conscientious person goes to by default is the golden rule, don't do harm unto others. But unfortunately, if a conscientious natured person is not spiritually evolved yet, and they get really deep into some spiritual practices and spiritual beliefs, they get to this place where the golden rule actually becomes a prison, and we can get stuck in not wanting to do harm unto others. And so because of that, I just end up keeping all of my stuff inside, and I usually will just give the people or person that I'm having some kind of struggle with, I just give them the pass in the name of compassion or in the name of kindness, and then I think I'm doing my spiritual work and my spiritual practice, by doing so. And, never mind that, the problems keep reoccurring, say with this particular person, or similar problems keep reoccurring with different people, but it still is a similar problem that will keep manifesting itself. And so, well, I'll just excuse it all in the name of compassion, in the name of kindness, in the name of, the golden rule. And it's this, the life, the spiritual journey is a paradox. And, where we might think that, that we're doing spiritual work by, I'll just take a step back, even though I do have a problem with what's going on, but I just keep reading it as, this is a space for me to practice my compassion, or whatever spiritual terminology or belief that we try to dismiss or excuse the bypassing with, that's actually where we need to dive into to do the spiritual work. And so if it's I'm maybe somebody that is having a reoccurring problem with maybe not standing up for myself in life, and maybe I keep finding myself in jobs where I have just time after time I'm experiencing managers that just don't validate me, or talk over me, or don't see me, don't hear me. But I'm just gonna hold, compassion for that person, and just pray for them, and that's me doing my spiritual work, right? Because I'm practicing compassion. No, I mean, you might be practicing compassion, and that is good. Any efforts to channel and anchor in compassion into this world is beneficial, and it is a good thing. However, if you are in that kind of scenario or situation, and again, well, not again, but obviously it doesn't have to be along those exact lines, but just using that as a window of insight into how we can be using spiritual bypassing all in the name of doing spiritual work, but we're not doing the spiritual work, we're actually doing spiritual bypassing. So with the example of a hypothetical of the person, having the reoccurring problem with managers, for example, in leadership. And so, say here I am showing up to another job, and gosh darn it, again, I have another manager that is just not hearing me, they're invalidating me, they don't seem to appreciate me, or that I'm even a member of the team, but I'll just keep practicing compassion. Okay, well, definitely, like I said, keep practicing compassion. That's good. Also, practice compassion for yourself. So it's the spiritual work part of an example like that is, if that's a reoccurring theme in your life, your spiritual work is to confront, to speak up, to use your voice, let yourself be heard, state your needs. And if the thought of doing any one of those things makes you uncomfortable, that's where your spiritual work is. And or even, if you don't want to take it as far as spiritual, personal growth, that's where your work is. And so where it can be incredibly easy to just use that, again, the term of spiritual bypassing, to use this sort of like, oh, well, I'm doing my spiritual work and just practicing compassion, and I don't need to say anything because that would create conflict, and I spiritually don't believe in creating conflict. Again, that might be a belief. I would invite you to question why you believe that. And why would you also assume that learning to speak up and state your needs, why you would assume that would create conflict? And so it's all kinds of, there's really honestly so many ways that spiritual bypassing manifests itself. Social media, getting into some of the dialogue that gets to be around some of our social hot buttons and topics right now. And say that maybe you're a person that has some strong opinions or even convictions on a certain topic, but yet you're not stating your opinions because, well, I don't want to offend anybody, or I don't want to hurt anybody's feelings, but gosh darn it, I really feel strongly about this, and I feel so strongly to the degree that I might even be restless throughout my day, or that I might not even get sleep over it. But, I'm just going to keep, doing my spiritual practice, and I'm not going to create any conflict because, I don't want to be a part of creating conflict. And it's where, yes, creating conflict just for the sake of creating conflict, not good or productive. However, it is inevitable. My camera cut off. Apologize about that. I believe what I was saying was, I hope this is going to flow right, because I kind of forgot exactly where I left off. But that, it's inevitable that when we're dealing with other human beings that have their own opinions and perspectives on things, you're going to hit pockets of conflict. It's inevitable. It's going to happen. But the conflict itself is not a problem. It's not a bad thing. It's not an issue. It only becomes an issue when we don't learn anything from each other, and we just end up going through the conflict with closed ears and closed eyes and closed hearts, and we actually don't take in anything that the other person or people is trying to share and communicate from their perspectives. And so conflict avoidance, that is a type of spiritual bypassing. I don't want to go there because, that's my family member and I haven't spoken to them in so long, and so I want to have it my way and just have, everything be nice and rosy and happy and whatever, and then all the while there's an issue that keeps lingering in the back of your mind or weighing heavy on your heart, but you keep resisting using your voice and talking about it because you don't want to create ripples. It doesn't do you any service whatsoever, because you do the thing and you get on the phone and you have the conversation, and the other person gets off the phone feeling, oh great, everything's fine, and all the while you're still, stewing in your stuff, and you keep trying to dismiss and bypass that there's anything going on with you, and all the while there is. And another thing we do in spiritual bypassing is we try to devalue emotions of any kind that fall in the negative spectrum. So whether it's anger, resentment, even hate, anything that falls in that negative spectrum as not being spiritual. So therefore, if you find yourself in a space of anger, I'm doing something wrong and I'm not being a spiritual I'm not being a spiritual person, or I'm no longer, practicing my spiritual beliefs. And if your spiritual beliefs are that anger has no value, I would invite you to potentially expand your belief system, because anger as an emotion itself has a tremendous amount of value. Anger is one of the greatest catalysts for change, whether it's in a personal life or in collective lives. Anger can really drive some change. And when anger is appropriately matched to a situation, it's not only powerful, it's valid. We have a right to feel. We have the right to feel from the whole sea of human emotions. And so that concept that, if I'm angry, that you're not being spiritual, that is a form of spiritual bypassing. And so it's all of these things that I know I've seen and heard, but I've even practiced it earlier in my spiritual practice. And so it's a topic I definitely wanted to take time to come around to and talk about and put out there, because I do hear some spiritual teachers talking about this, but not a lot. And it's something that if we don't check, we will keep finding ourselves in a space of stuckness, whether it's on a singular level or on a collective level. And it's because we're not doing the actual spiritual work and tasks and development that we need to do and we need to work through to get to that next step of growth and evolution. And so, like I've said before, and I'll keep saying it until I don't have a voice anymore, the spiritual path and spiritual work is not easy. It's not for the faint of heart. This is tough stuff. But a little side note on the just. As I've been going through this YouTube channel journey and, listening back and editing my videos and whatnot, I've become acutely aware of a few bad habits that I have in my language. First, the ums. And that's just more of being rusty in my public speaking skills. But I've realized I say just a lot and kinda a lot. So I'm catching it and I'm working on it. So to bring it back, I think I can, to what I was saying. Perhaps I can't. Oh, now the ums are just shouting out to me. Anyhow, I think at least I hope that I'm introducing this, if you're a person watching this video and you've never heard of the term or the concept spiritual bypassing, or that there was even a word for a word for it, and maybe you've even seen yourself doing it. There is a word for it. And that, oh shucks, I just kind of went blank. But anyways, that I hope that if you're new to this terminology, that I'm making sense, first of all. I definitely want to make sure that I'm doing it justice. But two, that, because really I could make an hour-long video on this topic, and I don't necessarily want to, but that I hope I'm explaining it well enough to where you can see where you may have been doing and practicing spiritual bypassing and not even realizing it. But it is a thing that we do, kind of similar to confirmation bias. Like, confirmation bias exists, and it's a thing that our minds do whether or not you even realize it's doing it. And it's very similar to spiritual bypassing. To a spiritual initiate, a spiritual student, this is a really tough thing to work through and to get a handle on. And I really appreciate that Robert Augustus Masters also, when he was initially talking about this subject, opened the door to, that as we just humans are moving into a more spirit and conscious base way of living, that we don't lose sight of our psychological health. And so that, in his words, that we spiritual seekers, spiritual students, need to approach our spiritual practice from a psycho-spiritual model. And by doing so, will help to reassure that we don't get hung up on spiritual bypassing, and that we don't get hung up on spiritual concepts and beliefs that actually shortchange us from our spiritual growth. So that's it for today. And like I said, there's a part of me that really wants to keep going with this, but maybe if anybody does want a more comprehensive video, or maybe even I can set aside some time to do like a live chat video, we can do that. But if anybody would like to have some more dialogue and information on... camera cut me off again. Okay. Real quick, yes, please feel free to comment and like, share, subscribe. Want future videos on the topic? Feel free to let me know, and we'll catch you next time. Bye. Aloha.